So do you have a story, a message, a passion to share? Have you thought about maybe doing it with a podcast? Maybe you listen to podcasts and you think, man, I would love to do that. Whether it's interviewing other experts with something you're passionate about, or maybe it's just even you sharing your experience and knowledge with the world. Well, I'm really excited today because today is a special episode of the Market Your Message show. And I'm going to be interviewing in just a minute or two Jeff Brown, and I'll introduce him in just a second. Someone who is podcasting for a living and a great example of what we're talking about today. And then come back tonight at 8 o'clock. We are going to be interviewing another podcaster, and I'll just leave it at that. Come back and listen. If you have some interest in podcasting, or maybe you've never even thought about podcasting, this is an opportunity to tune in and listen to our interviews today. So all this week, we are doing a Live Your Passion interview showcase. And in fact, I'm glad that you're here. Let us know that you're here. Go ahead right now and tell us your name, where you're watching from. We're broadcasting this in 6 locations across the web, 4 different places on Facebook and our groups and Facebook pages, over on YouTube and also on Twitter. So wherever you're watching from, welcome. We're glad that you're here. We hope this is an impactful 30, 40 minutes over the course of this interview that we're about to dive into today. So let me go ahead and say hello to a few people here. We've got Beth is here from Ohio, watching and tuning in. Welcome. There's my faithful moderator and also lovely wife, Charity. She says from Jacksonville, Florida. She should just say Charity from downstairs because she's literally downstairs. We've got Susie hanging out from Portland, Oregon. Glad that you are here, Susie. We've got Pamela watching from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. She says again, welcome back, Pamela. We got Tanisha here from New Jersey. And I'm sure so many more of you. Let us know you're here. If this is your first time catching us live, just put the word new in the chat, in the comments, so we can say hello to you. We're glad that you are here. So all this week, we are featuring people doing amazing things. We're going to introduce to you both people who are now doing this thing full time, whether it's write, speak, teach, or coach. And we're also going to introduce you to people who are in the trenches right now building their business, because it's a process for all of us. And so far, we've interviewed authors, we've interviewed bloggers. Check out the 2 female bloggers we interviewed yesterday. Amazing stories. And today we're going to be talking about podcasting, and we've got some more Thursday and Friday, some more cool stuff ahead. So be sure to be tuned in. If you're not already a subscriber of the YouTube channel, just hit subscribe. And also, if you hit the notification bell, it will let you know the moment we go live, so you don't miss any of these interviews this week. If you're over on Facebook, you can like or even share. If you know somebody who you say, you know what, they should have a podcast, then right now, before you do anything else, hit the share button and share that with them so they can come and join us in this conversation today. All right, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Jeff Brown. I'm really excited about this. I've gotten to know Jeff been a couple years. We actually met at a writers conference and went to lunch, hung out together, and we just connected. We both have similar values. We both have similar approaches to business. And I'm really, really excited to bring him on board. He comes from a radio background who took an interest in starting his own podcast. And today, Jeff's podcast, Read to Lead, is consistently in the top 10 podcast in the business category. He's gotten to interview some of the best-selling authors out there. If there's a favorite author that you have, I promise you Jeff has interviewed them. And if you're a lover of books, I'll tell you right now, you need to add Read to Lead podcast in your podcast list for sure. So I'm going to bring on Jeff. Jeff, are you there, my friend?
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you are here today. And like I said, we're going to be talking about podcasting, also your story a little bit as well. And I'm really excited to talk about this. You know, for me, I got started with blogging way back in 2009. Mm-hmm. And then I started hearing about podcasting. It was probably 2011, 2012. And I was like, man, I think think I want to do this podcast thing because it's just sounds like a lot of fun. And so that's when the genesis of my first podcast, Blog Your Passion. And then I started a second one called Simple Life Habits. It's funny because it's still out there. I stopped doing episodes years ago, but I still get an email
I remember
every
that one.
week on downloads for that. And I'm like, maybe I should still be doing this podcast. I mean, it's amazing. I hadn't done an episode in 4 or 5 years, and there's still people downloading and listening to it. It's crazy how that works. But why don't we start, Jeff, with telling everybody a little bit about you? I gave you an intro, but I'd surely like for you to tell everybody like who you are, who you serve, what your podcast is about.
Yeah, you mentioned Read to Lead. I started that about almost 8 years ago out of a passion for reading that I had. I had seen how intentional, consistent reading had impacted my career and life and confidence and opened my thinking as to what I thought I was capable of doing. And I was reading a book a week, and the idea hit me one day, to start a podcast to help leaders, CEOs, business owners, pastors, to more easily assess books. Maybe they weren't sure what they should be reading. Maybe they had convinced themselves they didn't have time to read. And I thought, well, maybe I could be a curator of the best books, help them sort of narrow their reading list, and at the same time, sort of offer an audio of accessing books. Not that it's a replacement for reading a book, but certainly could give you some key insights and main ideas from the book, and make a decision as to whether or not that's something you want to purchase and make your own. And so within about maybe 8-10 months, the show began to get some legs and gain some traction, and people seemed to enjoy it. And it was about that time where I started getting requests from people to say, hey, you kind of got this podcast thing down. Can you help me with my podcast? And so for about 6.5 years now, I've been coaching others one on one and in groups about how to launch and grow a podcast. In fact, I just started a 3 month podcast mastermind last night. And I've just immensely enjoyed that. So those two things together, serving leaders and business owners and CEOs with their reading habits, and at the same time, podcasters learning just how incredible this audio only medium can be when you leverage it effectively.
Absolutely. And what I love about podcasting is anyone anywhere can influence anyone anywhere, right? It's like
Right.
if you've got a decent microphone and internet connection, the ability to share your passion, you can influence people anywhere. And podcasting is such an intimate form of
Mm.
communication because people are often listening to it with their earbuds. It's very one-on-one. And I love that about podcasting. That's so awesome. Tell everybody, because a little bit about the origin story, because you came from a radio background, and then talk about like that initial decision to like, I'm going to do a podcast.
Mm. Yeah, I was employed in radio when the idea to do a podcast struck. To be honest, I thought about doing a podcast for nearly 5 years before actually deciding to do it. I sort of sat on the fence and sat on my hands and thought, well, what would people, listen to me for? What would I do a podcast about? And I just thought about it for a while. And one day I was on my way home from my job and listening to an audiobook as it's one of the ways I leveraged my time, my commute to try to make the most of it. And I was counting up the books I had read so far that year. And this was like late March. And I realized I'd read 10 books and I had 11 and 12 in the queue. And the thought hit me. In fact, I said it out loud in the car. That's like a book a week. And I hadn't realized I'd read at that pace. And I was listening to podcasts at that time too. This is 2013. I'd been listening to podcasts for a while. And though not all of them are weekly, most of the podcasts I listened to were weekly shows. And when I said that out loud in the car, that's a book a week. This light bulb went off. And I thought, maybe that's that podcast idea I've been looking for. And so I began making plans for it, researching online, equipment and that sort of thing and what I needed. And then I started looking at reaching out to guests, well, starting a website, a blog about a month before the podcast launched. And then June hit, and I was let go from my job. I was told, my services were no longer needed. The funny thing is earlier that same year, I'd had a conversation with my wife about sort of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of my radio career and kind of wanting to do my own thing at some point. And so we picked the date of December 31st. I would prepare between now and then to leave my job. One of the reasons I think I picked that date is because I wanted to, out of fear, wanted to push it off as far as possible that year. So I picked the last day of the year. But then June, midway through the year, the decision was made for me. And so the plan to roll out this podcast was already, well underway, and I had set a launch date of July, about a month later. And so I went ahead with those plans, and I just kind of like looked at, well, what's the silver lining here? I guess now I don't have to worry about juggling a job and interviewing people. I can interview people whenever I want. And so I've got some severance, and I've got some other things I can work on, a side hustle over here that I was doing. And so I kind of pulled all that together to try to keep my head above water for a while I figured out what I was going to do long term. And just sort of in the first few months, kind of made it up as I went.
Mhm.
But the podcast launched, and within a few months, as I said, it started getting some traction and some attention. And I thought maybe I can make something out of this eventually.
I love that. I love that. And this is a question I've got. I know I sent you a handful of questions, but I know you're comfortable in this scenario. So um, I'm not going to
We'll
ask you
see.
any. Yeah, I'm not going to ask you anything that you're not that wouldn't be easy for you to answer. But I want to talk about the courage piece because you're reaching
Mm,
out to these best-selling authors who've got immense popularity. They've probably sometimes hard to get to, hard to reach, and especially starting out, you're probably like, who am I to, interview Seth Godin and some of just the
right.
amazing people that you've interviewed. And I know that fear or rejection holds a lot of us back, whether it's putting our blog out there about our story or whether it's asking people to come on your podcast to interview. Can you talk about that from a mindset perspective of maybe even how you've developed over times from the beginning to where you are now about that, just having that courage piece to ask?
Yeah, someone on my podcast, a guest on my podcast yesterday, whose name is Jonathan Milligan, coincidentally, quoted, I think it was Susie Kaysen,
Mm.
who said, doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. I think I'm getting that right.
Yep.
And through the reading that I did back in the early 2000s and up through 2010, my mind was opened to the fact that uh, doubts, fears, these things we all experience are often manufactured. We don't live in the Sahara anymore. We don't have to worry about a saber-toothed tiger, attacking
Yes.
us from behind a bush, and so what's the worst that can happen? I like how I think it's John Maxwell who talks about the pain that we experience with doing the hard thing, with discipline that comes with doing things that scare us or that are hard to do. And we often see that pain and we decide that I don't want to experience that pain. So I'm going to put off doing this hard thing or put off self-discipline. But when we do that, what eventually comes later is the pain of regret. And
Mm.
so I've decided that, to me, I'd rather experience the pain that comes with self discipline and taking action now so that later I don't have to experience the pain that comes with regret. I don't want to be one of those people, and I think you talk about this in your book, who gets to the end of their life and says them and has regrets for all the things they wish they'd done that they never attempted. I
Yeah.
spent, the first 30 plus years of my life being one of those people, and through much of it through the reading that I did and my eyes being open to new ideas and new ways of thinking, people like Dan Miller and Seth Godin, who you mentioned, and others, I realized I don't have to live that way. The idea, Jonathan, at one point that I could earn more money, quite a bit more money, through things coming out of here, out of my head, my thinking, my expertise, my experience, my ideas, than I could working for somebody else. Like, that idea just seemed so out of reach to me at one point.
Yeah.
But over time, and based on what I surrounded myself with and who I surrounded myself with and who I listened to and who I read, I began to come out of that mindset and realize that's a lie I'm telling myself. And so many of us waste a lot of time believing those lies.
So well put. I love that. I hope you guys are getting some value out of this. If you are, just let us know in the comments if you're being encouraged right now, because we're at the beginning of 2021. All of us went through 2020. We've got some hard feelings about how 2020 didn't turn out the way that we'd wanted. But 2021, your future has not been written yet. And I don't know about you. I know, Jeff, I know this is true about you, but I don't know about you as far as everyone watching right now. But I would much rather live my passion and never fully reach it than to get to my life and always wonder. And I think that's like like the worst that could happen is for you to pursue your passion and maybe you don't ever get to do this full time. Well, what's the downside? The downside is to always wonder and feel that regret. And it's like you said, Jeff, it's like sometimes, and I think I heard this from Jim Rohn years ago, that the pain of discipline weighs in ounces, but the pain of regret weighs tons. And I would rather do the discipline of trying to launch a podcast or figure out technology. And maybe I don't fully reach what I ultimately wanted, but man, that weighs so much lighter in life that I lived life. And I interviewed Kerry Oberbrunner on Monday, and he used the Shawshank Redemption movie quote and said, you either got to get busy living or get busy dying. And, we're all dying. It's just a part of life. So why not choose to live? And I think that's the lesson that's learned here, which is so great. Let's talk about, other than mindset and reaching out to influencers and kind of getting comfortable with that, potential rejection. What were some other big challenges? Were there any other big challenges you faced when you were first getting started that you had to overcome?
Yeah, early on with a podcast that had no listeners yet, and you're asking people to come on, and people who are fairly well known in my case, and the authors themselves are fairly well known in the podcast that I was trying to put together. It wasn't like I was interviewing people in my hometown. I was trying to reach out to these New York Times bestselling authors in a lot of cases, and when you have no listeners, that can be kind of hard. And so, in the early going, there can be some no's, and I had to learn pretty quickly that a no is often not a forever no. It's more of a not right now. A lot of people don't realize that I asked Seth Godin 3 times before I got the first yes. In fact, I've invited Seth on my show a total of 5 times. He's been on twice, but that's the result of 5 invitations over the course of 7.5 years. John Maxwell, I had to ask twice over 2.5 year period. So I learned early on that a no is a not right now, and unless they emphatically tell you don't ever talk to me again, I don't ever want to hear from them. I've never had that happen, thankfully. Come back later and ask a second time, ask a third time, ask a fourth time, ask a fifth time. Don't be a pest. But don't be afraid to come back and ask again. And so that's a challenge that faces so many podcasters, especially those who want to interview people, and particularly if you want to interview high-profile people. In a lot of cases, you're going to have to face the challenge of rejection and know that it's not personal. I invited Matthew McConaughey to be on my show a couple weeks ago and got a no. I'll probably ask him again sometime in the future. I've got a request right now out to Michael J. Fox. I don't know if I'll get a yes, but I would never have thought I might be interviewing folks of that caliber a few years ago. But it just comes with consistently showing up, and like you learn in sales, if you've got any sort of sales experience, that it's a bit of a numbers game. You've got to keep going and having those at bats if you're going to have any chance of pulling it off.
That's so good. And if you want to get with either of those 2 guys, I can hold on one second. Let me just send a text here. Okay. Oh, Michael J said he'll get back to you this afternoon.
Appreciate that, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, I have no influence. I do have Back to the Future stuff. We can't see it in my wider shot. Yes. And we have a little bit of an 80s theme here. So that's why we had a little 80s sitcom music before the countdown
Mm.
timer. So that's what all that 80s music's about. Um, so we already hit on this idea of live your passion, but I just wanted to hit it one more time with you
Mm.
to talk a little bit about it because I mean, now that you are where you are, you could have when you got when things were winding down at the radio show, the
Mm.
comfortable, easy thing would have been, especially around the Nashville area, to like seek out another competitor, seek out another radio, and just kind of do what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Obviously stepping out and doing a podcast or getting serious about that meant meant you got to take courage, you got to move into the unknown. I don't know how this is going to work out. So can you talk about now why making that decision and living something that you're passionate about means so much to you?
Yeah. When I got let go, or prior to getting let go, I had second thoughts about leaving, a decent paying job with benefits and all. I didn't have children, but I've got a wife to support. Um, and I felt like God had given me that job 13, 14 years earlier.
Mm,
That was something that he orchestrated. And I kept asking myself, is it right to leave when I feel this came from him?
mm,
And when I got let go, that was to me God's way of saying, I'm taking that off the table for you. It is time for you to do your own thing. Quit, messing around and get serious about this. And so that was kind of a sort of kick in the pants, I think, that I needed to do that. I think he knew that that's what it was going to take for me to actually pull the trigger, was to give me no other choice. Now, one of the cool things that happened from that is I had a side hustle I'd been working on, helping people with mobile apps and websites, small businesses that I'd kind of cultivated for a couple of years. And so I dove headfirst into that as the podcast was launching to sort of keep my head above water. And within 30 days of doing that full time from having done it part time, in 30 days, my take home pay was twice what my take home pay was in 30 days at my radio job.
mm.
So
Wow.
I was like, okay, God, you're right. I can do this. Now, my take home pay wasn't, that for necessarily every month after that in the early going, but that was a sign to me that I can do this. I can, find my own way. I won't do this particular thing long term, but I can do this now until I kind of, get myself established and figure things out. So, anybody looking to make that kind of a transition from a regular job to working for yourself, I always recommend, just as a side note, to cultivate a side hustle. I know you've talked
Yep.
to many in your group about starting something on the side to bridge the gap between one
Hmm.
and the other. So now that I've been able to live my passion for now the last 7, 8 years, I would never go back to working for someone else unless I had no other choice,
Yeah.
right? And I won't say never, but a choice but that. That's the only reason I would do that. Um, I am able to. It's funny, when I got into radio, it was exciting to be behind a microphone talking to a community, to have that stage. And if you had told me back then that one day it would be possible from my bedroom, a spare bedroom in my house, to reach the world, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah.
And that's what the internet gives us the chance to do, whether it's a blog, a podcast, or YouTube, or what we're doing right now, a live stream. You have something worth sharing. You discounted. Our mutual friend Brian Dixon says, things that come naturally to you or that you discount is magic to other
Mm,
people.
mm.
And I think it's important to remember that you have something to share and you need to share it, and you're denying other people that gift when you don't.
Yeah. So good. I love that. And yeah, you're right. I mean, we just have such amazing opportunity today in just the generation and the time that we live in. And like I like to say, anyone anywhere can influence anyone anywhere, which is so great. I know people, friends of mine, who they literally live in a town of less than 100 people in Canada. It's too cold up there for me. I'm in Florida, and I probably shouldn't even be wearing a sweatshirt right now because that makes me look really, really weak, right? I mean, how cold can it be outside right now? I think we had a low of 39. So, it's probably going to
Ooh.
be 70 before the day's out. So this sweatshirt will be coming off. But my friend who lives in Canada, he runs a multi-million-dollar online business. He could not do that before the age of the internet, living with 100 people in a small province and a small town in Canada. So it's absolutely amazing. What's been, and I know you've had a lot, but what's been a highlight or a real success or win for you so far in this journey?
Some of the interviews I've been able to do. One book that really impacted me in the early 2000s was a book called Purple Cow by Seth Godin. That was kind of a book that
Yeah.
reignited my love for reading. And so then, 15-ish years later, to be able to sit down with him for 30 or 45 minutes one on one and have a conversation just blows my mind. That's just one of the things that a podcast, enables you to do. John Maxwell is another. I talked to Stephen M. R. Covey, the son of the late Stephen R. Covey, author of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People earlier this year or last year. Liz Weissman, one of my favorite authors, wrote a book called Multipliers. And so, if I wanted, apart from a podcast, wanted to sit down with some of these folks and take up a hour of their time, it probably cost me a lot of money, and rightfully so, right? But through a podcast, I can sit down with them for that time for free,
Mm.
uh, with the promise of sharing that conversation with my audience. So that's been a real treat. And then you've just recently experienced this, so I know you appreciate it. But earlier in 2020, about 9 months ago, being able to sign a deal with Baker Books, the same publisher that Jonathan is published with, and
Yeah.
that's coming out in August. Thought it was going to be the fall, but it's actually the end of summer, August 31st. And so I'm excited about that. It's in the editing phase right now. You know all about that, I'm sure. So there's going to be some back and forth these next few months, but looking forward to getting that out there and actually holding it in my hand. So it's been really neat to see how something like a podcast, this little thing I started 7.5 years ago, has led to becoming a traditionally published author.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this book. As a lover of books, like you can ask my family, they think I'm crazy because like books are taking over my house. My daughter is a freshman at Liberty, and I joked with her that when she moved out, there's a joke at this house that I'm slowly taking over the entire house. So this is like I turned this into a video studio. It used to be my son's bedroom. He wanted the loft area kind of as his own apartment. I mean, he's 16 after all. He needs his own apartment, right? So I took this over. So then I have two rooms, but then I have an exercise room where my treadmill is. And then when my daughter's moving away to college, I joked I have some bookshelves right behind me, and I was redoing the studio, and I said I'm turning your bedroom into a library, so I can actually have a place for all my books, because they're just stacked up. I mean, I have a couple bookshelves in my closet, but it's like taken over and they're just everywhere. And it's like, I'm a lover of books. So I'm personally excited about this book. Again, guys, it's called Read to Lead, the simple habit that expands your influence and boosts your career. And now, having gone through the process of writing a book, I can say this for sure. Like, and I know you could agree to this as well, Jeff. What it does is it takes your 5 or 10 years or more experience with a topic, and it really forces you to narrow it down into a summary of 200, 250 pages. That's literally like, by buying a book, you are buying someone's 10 years of experience on a topic. And I think sometimes we don't realize just how valuable this art of reading is, whether you read or you listen to the audiobook. Either way, I mean, books are powerful. I remember being in college and somebody told me that Charlie Tremendous Jones quote that you probably know, that you'll be the same person you are today 5 years from now, except for the books you read and the people you meet. And
Mm.
I know I'm personally passionate. Every Sunday I choose what's my book for the week. And my goal is to read that book. Sometimes I'm in more than one book, but that's a real passion of mine. So can you just talk a little bit as we kind of wrap things up about just the passion and desire and need for reading?
Yeah, I have found in my own personal journey that no single habit has impacted that journey more. When I began that in the early 2000s and was traditionally employed, I got tapped to do more things. I got more opportunities. I was doing something through that simple habit that most of my colleagues were not, and it separated me from the pack. It helped me take the lead in so many different ways. And as I now continue on my own, and actually leading up to launching my own thing, I mentioned this earlier, but the books I read uh, changed my mindset, opened my eyes to what was possible for me. And as I continue to read throughout my journey here, personal development and professional development type books and books on mindset and leadership and that sort of thing, I want to be a lifelong learner. I think that desire is one that you need to take seriously. You've got to cultivate it. And as you said, Jonathan, so many people have taken years of expertise and condensed it into 200 pages that if you just read, 10 pages a day, you can finish a 200 plus
Yeah.
page book a month, and so we all, many of us think we don't have the time to read, and depending on your season of life, there may be some truth to that. But I think by and large, most of us don't consider it high enough on the priority list to make time for. So even now, I schedule time to read. I set aside specific time in my schedule dedicated to just reading to ensure that I read as much as I'd like to. And when you look at all the people who have been impacted by reading, there's people cited in my book like Oprah Winfrey and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and the list goes on and on and on, who've been impacted by this habit. I think it's a way to have people you might not ever be able to meet mentor you one on one for $20. I mean, that's probably the simplest and most powerful
Yeah.
at the same time way I can put it.
That's great. Well put. Uh, and I just am a believer in be the most resourceful person you know. And I will say to any authors or you want to write a book one day, one of the best habits you can have right now is to be preparing. And the way that you can prepare is read good books, highlight,
Mm,
mark, index. So when I was writing my book, and I'm sure this is with you, true with you, Jeff, it was easier to recall resources. I'm like, wait a minute, I remember reading that in this book, or there was this quote. I remember this story reading the Walt Disney autobiography that I want to include in my book. And by being a reader, it allowed me to be allowed it to be a little bit easier. It's not easy writing a book, but a little bit easier because you got stories, illustrations, quotes, things that you can draw from.
mm,
So, what's next for you? Obviously, the book. Anything
mm.
else next for you this year, 2021?
Yeah, in 2020, I decided in January, this time last year, that 2020 was going to be the year that I got serious about person workshops. And we saw how that turned out for 2020, and a lot of things I'd planned ended up getting canceled or moved. And so my hope this year is to recommit to that. I'm hoping that sometime in the not too distant future that we get back to a relative normal, whatever that is. But also too, when it comes to events and public speaking and things of that nature, many more are now prepared. If live and in person is not an option, better prepared to do something online. And so I'm looking at several different and negotiating with several different event organizers right now for public speaking opportunities starting in June and beyond. And then some live workshops that I did in 2019 that I wanted to ramp up in 2020. I'm looking forward to bringing those back in the new year. So hopefully that pans out, unlike last year.
Yeah. My opinion is live events or in-person events are going to come back stronger than ever before because people
Mm,
are going to be
mm,
craving for it. You know, it's
mm,
I know we are where we are right now and things aren't as exciting, but I promise you, as things this too shall pass, we will get
mm,
back to some normal. We don't know how soon that will be, but I promise you that it's going to come back because people are going to be craving it. People are going to want it. And so I think there's going to be a real opportunity for anybody who's an influencer or desires to run events. It will come back in a big way. What would you say to somebody that's watching right now? They're just on the fence. It's so easy for us. You talked about it earlier, the kind of the lies that go in your head. I like to
Mhm.
say, I think I heard a quote once. I think it was from Rich Dad Poor Dad, who he said in his book, lies are excuses you tell yourself, which have been true for me. And so there's these lies, there's these challenges, they hold us back. They're on the fence. I've personally talked to people, Jeff. I remember doing a call with somebody who had recorded over, I think, 30 podcast episodes and had yet to launch the podcast.
Mm.
They were all sitting on his computer, his hard drive. And
Mm.
I talked with another lady. She had written 2 entire novels that were just sitting on her computer.
Mm.
And so whether you write or you speak, there is this anxiety here. And it's why I'm so passionate about helping people understand that your message does matter and we need you to share it. But I guess I would say any kind of closing remarks as we kind of close things down on if someone's on the fence, they're like, oh, maybe I want to do a podcast this year. What would you say?
One of my favorite quotes from Seth Godin when he was on my show the first time, and I share this wherever I can, and I think it applies here to your question. He says, "We don't take action because we believe. We believe because we take action."
Mm,
And then he punctuated that with "do first, believe second." We often sort of have convinced ourselves through well-meaning parents or teachers or coaches that if we just believe in ourselves enough, and that's not necessarily bad advice, but if we just believe in ourselves enough, we can do anything we set our minds to. And Seth's point is, no, we've got to just take action and
yeah,
not worry about whether or not we have got that belief in ourselves yet. That will eventually come, but it's the action that has to take place first. Do first, believe second. And I think if more of us took that
awesome.
posture, then we would accomplish a lot more.
Yeah, that's great advice. Like just start taking action, right? We want to analyze it too quickly, don't we? We want to take a little bit of action and analyze it. Did I get the result I wanted? Well, that's not how it works. You got to take lots of actions like a farmer. You got to get up every
Mm,
day and plant your seed and plant and water and nurture the ground. And it's going to be a while before the harvest comes. So take action, measure your actions, and suspend measuring like your results for a season. I
mm.
think that's so good. Well, where can people connect with you online? Obviously, your book is available in pre-order. I think we dropped the link for people
Oh,
already.
thank you.
But where else can people connect with you?
Yeah, the best place is readtoleadpodcast.com. So check out the podcast there. That's my website, readtoleadpodcast.com, and you can stay apprised of the book developments at the same time.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing with us your journey, especially in the podcasting. I know it was an encouragement to
Mm.
many. There's lots of great feedback coming in. People were encouraged and helped by your story. So thank you for sharing that today. And let's definitely stay in touch. By the way, if you guys want to check out the Read to Lead podcast, he released my interview yesterday. So go
That's right.
subscribe to the podcast and listen to my story and the book. And I will say this with about Jeff, because I was a listener of the podcast before you had me on, and have been. And I think the thing that I love the best about your podcast is I can tell you actually looked at the book. So, and I'm saying that for not to call anybody out, but I was invited on a radio talk show for a 30-minute
Mm.
interview. I won't say the name, but halfway through, I mean, this is live talk radio. And halfway through the interview, I'm thinking, this guy hasn't even taken a look at my book.
Has no
He
clue.
doesn't even have a clue what it's about. My book's
Mm.
more for like, teachers, writers, speakers, coaches, thought leaders, right? And he's talking about small business and entrepreneurship and open up a store. And, I'm like, that's not my thing. I don't do retail, small business. It's not what this is about. He's asking me about,
Yeah.
those sort of things. And so I
Mm.
appreciate that
That's
about
frustrating.
you. that it's very easy conversation, and you'll see this, guys. If you aren't subscribed, go subscribe to Read to Lead, because what you'll find is it is a great summary of the book, because Jeff just does a great job of actually taking the time to pay attention to what's in the book. And I really appreciate that about our interview. So thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thanks for being here. All right, everybody. Did you enjoy Jeff's story? I hope you did. I hope you are inspired. You could take something that you have experience in. Maybe you've had experience with something for 10 or 15, 20 years, and it's been in a 9-to-5 setting. And you say, can that translate into my own business? Well, Jeff's a perfect example. Came from the background of radio. You can tell he's got the voice for radio. And there he goes, starting his own podcast and matching it up with something he was passionate about, which was reading. So that's just such a great example. I hope you were inspired by that. Come back tonight, 8 o'clock. We're going to have another podcaster. I want to tell his story. He's helping what he calls silver entrepreneurs, which I think is a very creative title. We're going to be talking about that tonight. And I hope you have a great day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Jeff, you can hang on for a second.